Hi, my name's Sonia and this is my channel, See It Then, See It Now. These bedside tables originally came with a headboard that attached to the wooden pieces fixed onto the back of these tables, but since I've made my own amazing headboard, I don't need these. They were just screwed on and they came off really easily. Next, I removed the handles. I have decided that I'm going to reuse these because the fronts of the tables are curved and finding replacements might have been a little bit tricky. I gave both tables a really good scrub with sugar soap, rinsed them off and let them dry. More of the boring bit. I filled all the cracks and battered areas with wood filler. Once it was dry, I sanded everything smooth and I wiped away the dust and I masked off the inside of the drawers so that no paint would get into them, and that's all the boring bit done, nearly. A bit more to go. To prepare the surface, I gave them a coat of Dixie Belle Slick Stick. This actually highlighted a couple of spots that needed a bit more filler, so I filled, I sanded, and then I went over the whole piece with another coat of the Slick Stick. Now for the fun part, we get to put the colour on, and yes, I went blue to tie these in with the other furniture in the room. I do promise you, I do use other colours when I'm upcycling furniture. These are the last of the blue furniture upcycles from me for a while. So I started with the legs with Dixie Belle Dusty Blue, and I find it easier to paint legs when the furniture piece is upside down. Once those were dry, I turned the table back upright and I began to work on the top, blending Dusty Blue around the edges with Haint Blue in the centre. Later on, I do actually end up changing this to the whole thing being Dusty Blue, but I'll explain why when we get to that part. I carried the same blending around the front and sides of the table. I also removed the drawers and I painted the front and sides just inside where the drawer fits, and the sides and top of the drawers, just so there was no white showing when the drawer was opened. Once everything was dry, I did go in and give everything a second coat. The back just got a coat of the Dusty Blue. For the tops, I wanted to use this pretty napkin which I've already used elsewhere in the guest room. My idea was to make the napkin design mirror opposites on each table, so the table on the left of the bed would have the pattern rising up the left corner and the table on the right would have it rising up the right corner. That way, even if a coaster or a drink was on the table, you'd still be able to see the design. This plan did pose a very slight problem though. The napkin only had a right-hand corner option. If I turned it to fit the left corner, the writing on the napkin would be going up the side of the table instead of across the front. So I did have to tear the napkin into pieces and kind of reassemble it like a jigsaw, to create the design going up the left hand side of the table. Tearing the napkin rather than cutting it does help to blend the pieces together so the edges and the joins don't show. I did also remove as much of the white background as possible when I was getting these pieces ready. Normally with decoupage, you want a light background so that the napkin is bright and the pattern shows really well. But in this case, I actually wanted the pattern to be muted and not really bright. So I was happy with putting it on this background rather than a white background. I glued the pieces down with Mod Podge, carefully dabbing them in place with a sponge. Once I had the top complete, I placed 2 small pieces of napkin on the front of the drawers, and after all the napkin pieces were dry, I sealed them with a coat of Mod Podge. I now needed to cover some of the white background area of the napkin and blend around the edges. The writing was very faint, so to stop this from completely disappearing, I first went over this with a darker Parisian blue acrylic paint. Then, to blend the edges and the background of the napkin, I painted around the napkin and in between the design with the dusty blue. I then went back in with the Parisian blue just to bring the writing back forward and some of the pattern that had been a bit lost behind the dusty blue paint. I did then also add a bit of a hand painted detail to some of the flowers just to help make them stand out. Yes, this was a little bit time consuming, but this type of painting, I love it. I love this kind of painting, and I go off into my own little world, in my own little bubble, and it doesn't feel like it's taking forever. It doesn't feel like a chore. I just love it. I don't have a problem with this kind of painting. So yes, it was a little bit time consuming, but that's fine with me because I was in my happy place. I have moved on a little bit here, but you can see where I've tried to blend where I've painted around the napkin in the dusty blue. I tried to blend it back in with the Haint blue in the middle, and I really didn't like how this was looking. It now looked like there was a diagonal stripe going across the top of the table, and I really didn't like that. And I could have carried on fussing with it and trying to make it right, but I decided just to simply paint over the whole of the top in the dusty blue. And that's the beauty of paint. If something doesn't work, you can always just change it. When I was editing this video, I was on holiday in Corfu, and when I was looking at this footage, I thought that the contrast between the flowers and the area that I painted was too much, and that the flowers looked really muted and the other areas seemed to stand out more. I was frantically planning on how I was going to fix this problem when I got back, but when I checked on my photos on my telephone, they looked fine. So I was like, okay, panic over. Let's just have a look at it when we got back. And it was just the way the footage appeared on the screen. That said, I ran straight upstairs to check them the moment we got home, just to be sure. The mould on the side of this table to me looked a bit unfinished, a bit like a photo frame with no picture in. So I created a clay rose to fill the space. After pressing the clay into the mould, I popped it in the freezer for 20 minutes, just to make removing it easier. Once I had it removed from the mould, I positioned it and then I gently pushed the edges down so that it sat flush against the curved surface of the table. Once the clay was dry, I thought the easiest way to get these coloured so that it matched the rest of the table was to decoupage them. I've never decoupaged clay before, so I wasn't sure how well this was going to work, but it was relatively easy enough to do. I had to be gentle and it was a bit fiddly, but it was very quick and yeah, very easy. Once the napkin was dry, I did seal it with a coat of Mod Podge. Once the Mod Podge was dry, I glued them in place using wood glue. For a finishing touch, and to tie it in with the other pieces of furniture in the room, I highlighted all the moulds with some silver gilding wax. I applied it with my finger and a tiny brush for the edges. A little bit of wax goes a long way. Finally, I sealed everything with 3 coats of Rust-Oleum matte clear furniture lacquer, giving the tops an extra coat for durability since they get the most use. These tables also came with glass tops, so that should protect them even more. The last step was the handles. I started by soaking them in a mixture of water and white vinegar. Once they'd had a soak, I scrubbed them clean with pink stuff. Once they were dry, I gave them a fresh look with some silver rub and buff. So let's have a reminder and see it then. and let's see it now. That's it for the bedside table makeover, and that actually completes the pieces of furniture for this room. If you've not seen my other makeovers, then do feel free to go check those out and let me know what you think of these beautiful bedside tables. Leave me a comment and hit that like button. You are also more than welcome to subscribe. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram, where I aim this year to make sure that I post regular updates. All that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon in the next one. Bye!